zvechokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kuti isu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe zvechokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kuti isu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe kana dzimba dzedu dzingadai dziri dzavo mawanzira vanoita.
Patriarchy and tradition have always been the biggest excuse and hindrance in terms of advancing women's rights, especially in African countries, Zimbabwe in particular, where women have always been taking the back seat and allowing men to lead in governance issues. Maybe from the micro level of the family, the man has always been said is the head of the house, to government and political issues where men have taken dominance. But our constitution has been effectively ensuring that there's gender equality and gender equity. But most of the people, when they listen to these issues, they think, wow, this is gender issues and stay away. But I want us to take an interest on the role that women have played in changing the political discourse of this country. I'll look at Namatai Kwekweza, the role that as a young woman she played in ensuring that we all begin to take real interest in constitutionalism in this country. The role of women in constitution making, the role of women in making sure that laws that matter not only to women but to everybody are legislated and are justiciable. Now, to help me discuss this topic is Heart and Soul TV and Radio on This The Situation Right Now, in partnership with the Young Women Leading organization that talks about constitutionalism. We lead. I have lawyers and human rights activists in the studio. I have Yasin Nari, my good friend. Welcome, Yasin, and thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Beautiful. And I have my sister and wonderful friend, Jacqueline Sande. Thank you very much for coming through, Jackie.
Thank you for inviting me.
Beautiful. Now, we are going to be discussing the issues around feminism and constitutionalism. And I want us to be deliberate and make this matter to everybody, not just to women, but also to men out there, that people should take cognizance and begin to understand why this matters. Now, I'm just going to start with you, Yasin. Mm-hmm. What is the role that women can play or should play in terms of constitutionalism in making sure that the constitution matters to the people of Zimbabwe?
Well, I think women, just like men, should be at the forefront of ensuring proper governance in the country as encapsulated in the Constitution. Unfortunately, we don't see as many women taking part in driving a constitutional national governance process, and I think that's a bit disheartening. But women really should legitimately be at the forefront of national governments, and as it is, they're not. So that's a bit of a worry.
Now we'll come to that, but Jackie, in your opening statements, I want to hear what you think as a lawyer. I mean, Yasin is a lawyer, but she's not more on the practicing side. She's outside of the law of the court. But you are in the court and interpreting the Constitution and sitting there to defend the Constitution as a woman. How far are women making a real effort to defend the Constitution and to begin to ensure that there's feminism, there's a feministic touch in the Constitution of Zimbabwe?
Thank you very much, Blessed. What I would want to say in my opening remarks is that the women's movement has made great strides since independence in trying to achieve equality and a level playing field for women. But I would also say in the same breath that women themselves have been rather let down and sometimes have not taken up some of these opportunities quite seriously. For instance, right now we do have the women's quota reserved for women in parliament, seats in parliament specifically reserved for women. But apart from those seats, you find out that the percentage of women parliamentarians is still very, very much low, which means that we are sort of like relaxed. The law is trying to push for a 50-50 scenario where we have for every man a woman also in parliament, but we are far from reaching that even with the women's quota. So I'd like to encourage women to stand up and take up these opportunities which have been availed by virtue of the law itself. We are coming from a situation where before the promulgation of the Age of Majority Act, you find that women were considered to be perpetual minors. They would not be able to make any decisions on their own without being assisted by a patriarchy in their lives, be it their husband or their father. But now we have been granted this. We have made great strides since the promulgation of the Age of Majority Act, which is 18, which sees everyone who has attained the age of 18 as a capable individual of making their own decisions and running their own lives. So this is a great opportunity for women, which I think they tend to underestimate by not taking full advantage of the opportunities that are there to level the playing field, to have more women coming up as parliamentarians, more women taking up leadership positions.
Now that brings me to the next important question. Constitutionalism in Zimbabwe has just been a very difficult issue. Jackie raises a question of the constitution providing for, empowerment to ensure that women get into parliament. But we don't have that. In fact, shouldn't we be having a 50-50 according to the constitution in parliament?
We should be. But I think for me, I'm of two minds. I think it's extremely progressive that we have provision for the quota system to have women represented. But what's happened now is the percentage of women directly elected into parliament has actually decreased. So once the quota system, for example, if it's scrapped, if it's removed, at the end of the day, has there really been meaningful women's empowerment when you just give it away and the country clearly isn't catching on to a women's empowerment? So I think for me, the law provides, we have a very sound legal framework, I think, for the empowerment of women. But on the ground, in practicality, particularly in relation to the quota system, I think it might, whilst it's a great thing, it's doing a disservice in some aspects, in that it almost seems like a chirango, like a token, that women, you get your seats, this is fine, and the rest of the country just becomes relaxed. They don't take these females seriously because they've been elected on a party list system. They've been put forward by their parties. So even in terms of accountability, then it comes into question, because the assumption or what people perceive is that these females are answerable to their political parties.
But Yasin, the Constitution also provides that there should be balance in parliament, even at the elected level. And that's not happening. Yeah. That is the challenge. So I want us to zero in on, we have laws, but they're not being followed. What is the challenge with us following the Constitution in this country across the board?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, again, raise any issues with the legal framework. I think it's the patriarchal system, like Jackie said, where women shy away from these positions or these opportunities that they've been given, because there's a tendency for them to be victimized as women for taking up, be it political space or, corporate positions. They're victimized for that. So that could come in the form of sexual harassment. In the field of politics in particular, this is when you see this happen. And again, I don't think it's a political thing, because this is happening to women from various political parties. For example, the chairperson of ZEC, Ms. Chigumba, was subject a few years ago during the electoral period 2018 to vicious attacks and being labeled a prostitute. So people personalize the role that women take to a point where if you're a mother, if you're someone's daughter, whatever it is, it negatively impacts you because you're constantly being attacked on a personal level as opposed to focusing on the job that I've taken and what I'm actually bringing to the table. It's the same thing with Ms. Thokozani Kupe. She's also been, threatened. It's well recorded, where she's been threatened, she's targeted, she's attacked. And bear in mind, we're looking at just across the political divide. And I think that sort of scenario makes it very difficult. And even worse is when it starts getting to, for example, politically motivated sexual violence. There's Joanna Mamombe. What happened to her? And then you see a woman like that coming to the courts, and there's a reversal, and all of a sudden she is at fault. And this specifically happens to women. It's very rare to see the male individuals in leadership or etc. being targeted for, the number of women they have, for example. We don't do that to them. But with women, it becomes very personal. It makes it very difficult as leaders, as mothers, as sisters, as daughters. So no one would, in their right mind, no one would want to come forward and, expose themselves to that. And, we could make the demand that, yes, there's women who were a bit more feisty and say, it doesn't matter, come out, fight, just be present. But we can't ignore the reality on the ground, that it has real repercussions, mental, physical, political, all of that. So women shy away from leadership because of that.
Now, Jackie, the Constitution also says with their appointments of high decision-making bodies, there should be at least 50% of women in those appointments. Our cabinet doesn't look like it was etched from our Constitution. Now, is there a desire in this political space for the Constitution to be respected?
Thank you very much, Blessed. When you look at the cabinet appointments, I think I will also reiterate and maybe expand on what my sister Yasin has been saying, that it's all to do with the atmosphere or the prevailing environment in which we are operating, whether it allows women to stand out and take up these opportunities. And also maybe to also look at the issue of the women's quota system again, that sometimes women then tend to relax and focus more on the women's quota, not take up the opportunity to compete as an elected parliamentarian, which then qualifies one to be considered for appointment in the cabinet. So in that regard, the president's hands will be tied because he has to take a certain number from elected parliamentarians, in just a few, I think it should be 4 or 5 are limited to those outside of Parliament. So the mere fact that we have very few women coming up to stand up and compete and seek to be elected as a parliamentarian then reduces the number of women who are available to be appointed in those high decision-making positions, like being a member being a minister in the cabinet. So in that regard, we have a good constitution, several good pieces of legislation, but if the environment does not permit for women to stand up and participate and be counted apart from the women's quota, then it will be it's just a beautiful piece of legislation to look at with very little impact on the lives of people out there. I would also say that we have the Gender Commission, which is supposed to be looking at such issues and how to have more balance in our leadership positions, and perhaps they could do more in terms of reaching out more and finding out or trying to encourage women to participate in terms of elections, be it from council. We look right now, we are faced with the 2023 plebiscite, which is coming up. How many women have said that they are going to stand up? And another issue which can also stand in as an impediment is that of financial resources. How many women are empowered enough to fund their own campaigns. You'll find that some people will win because they have the resources. They have the resources to convince the electorate that they are capable, or they are capable of doing the job. They will go out with the t-shirts, they'll be able to fund their campaign and do rallies and so forth. But women sometimes have that impediment that they do not have the financial capacity.
I just want to play the devil's advocate here, just to stimulate the debate. But we continue to hear this thing around resources, around women don't have resources, you know. But we find that women are the most expensive in society. They have got amazing expensive hair, you know, Brazilian, they have got nails and stuff like that. And some of them say that we don't have money to start business, but they have capital in their head. How do you justify that?
No, it's not all women. It's not all women who have that. And you find out even those women, perhaps they are also relying on some men at the back, behind, to sponsor that kind of a lifestyle. But when you do look at our history, historically speaking, women have been marginalized. Women are more vulnerable. And like I said, before the promulgation of the Age of Majority Act, Legal Age of Majority Act, LAMA, you'll find that women were considered as perpetual minors, which means that if you want to buy a house, you have to go with your dad to sign for you, or go with your husband to sign for you. And even on the deed, it is shown that so-and-so bought a house, but she was assisted by, she's married or she's not, and the father was there to send us in and assist. So this is the background that we have to look at. And in order for us to make meaningful strides going forward, we need to appreciate the history behind why women are reluctant. Traditionally, it is the men who hold these positions, who make decisions. Coming from a family setup, women are not allowed to participate in the family discussions. If there is a diary going on, women are cooking, and men are making the decisions which affect the family, including women. And that setup cascades upwards, going all the way up to national politics. And you find that women would much rather take a back seat and allow the men to go and take up that role. And also not to underestimate the impact of stereotyping. Those women then who chose to go against culture and tradition and perception and stand up and want to participate in politics, you are then labeled. You're given names. The Thokozani group, as you're referring to, you called all sorts of names and now accused of being a person of loose morals just because you've chosen to participate. And if you are one who is maybe a conservative or reserved, then you find out that you don't want to tarnish your image. You don't want to risk tarnishing your image. So it would then require only those women with thick skins to stand out and participate in politics.
Yeah, thick skin indeed. But Yasin, is the issue that we've got now, we do have good laws, as you say, but back then, as JQ was saying, women were regarded as perpetual minors and stuff like that. This means that the law was bad. What role should women play in ensuring that we continue to have progressive laws and that those laws are actually implemented?
I think women are responsible for advocating for themselves and what they need. And I think we saw that happen with the 2013 Constitution, where there was a formulation of what they call the Group of 20, the G20, which comprised of, female political leaders, academics, activists, who really drove the process of what women need or what women were seeking in terms of their various rights, be it, sexual reproductive rights or, things to do with domestic violence, etc., sexual violence. So I think their role really is to drive that process, to drive the point home. But I also want to bring it back to the point that in the Constitution, the provision is that women and men are equal. We tend to put an emphasis, and I think this comes from, our societal beliefs, perhaps in general, that women should fight for themselves. It's just the women. They should stand up for themselves. They should do this. I feel that there's not...
Is it not you who make it that way?
We have to, but we shouldn't. The issue is the males should equally be interested.
Yeah, my question is it not the manner in which women fight for rights that alienates men?
Thank you for saying that. It comes back to the jibe about, makeup and hair. No one is going to ask you, Blessed, and say, Blessed is wearing shoes that cost $1,000, for example. No one is going to ask you. No one is going to say that. But everybody else will say, these women are being aggressive. These women, are combative. We're not combative. You're just not listening. You don't want to hear it. You don't want to change. And I think that speaks to the fear that the empowerment of women somehow diminishes the man. So instead, we feed into the stereotypes, which my sister spoke about. That while women fight too much, you come across as argumentative. And, even if we flip it over contrarily, the same behavior that, women are accused of being aggressive, etc., if a male counterpart displays that exact same, passion, all of a sudden that's a leader. He's a principled man. He will fight, it's something to be admired. When a woman does it, she's talking too much. Why is she even mentioning it? She should be grateful that we've, made these legal provisions for them. So it really speaks to those prejudices. And I think it's sad to say that, we have a patriarchal system, but we also have a misogynist state. We're just inherently, there's a prejudice against women. Women should know their place.
They'll start asking, where's your husband?
Where's your husband? As if, that's the end all to be all, having a husband. No, it's not. You'll see women in positions of leadership who perhaps might even be thriving more than the men. But then again, because we have to tear that woman down because it threatens the male dominance and stereotype that's there, then we start calling them names. She's too much. She's too emotional. And this just doesn't happen again to politicians or etc. This happens in companies, in law firms, in civil organizations. All of that, it happens. So my concern is that, when you come to a public platform, we speak about it and say, yes, we care about women. We want them to be empowered. They should have, all of this. But when it comes to the ground, you could be a woman who's a director in a company, but someone who is a junior in the company is accorded more respect when you walk into a meeting.
So when you're speaking, you said that some would say that we gave you these laws to empower you. This implies that men are making the laws to try and empower women. What are women doing to make laws, to make constitutionalism work for their benefit? And, I'm saying this not in the sense that women alone should fight for their rights and empowerment, but I'm saying I was raised by a woman, and I should be able to have been trained by that woman to be able to fight for other women.
But that's not the case. It's lovely when we talk about it, here and, in a theoretical sphere. It sounds wonderful. But somewhere along the line, that patriarchal system infiltrates. There's many men who've been raised by single mothers. And the assumption would be, that they would respect women, they would hold them in high regard. But because of the system that's in place, and again, I'm speaking to the practical system, not what's on paper. The system that's in place, just it infuses that, the disrespect or the lack of value which a woman brings into whatever space it is. So I think it's very difficult to get to the bottom of this because the system itself, even though women are fighting, women have been advocating for their rights, since 1980, even before. But even up until today, I agree it's progressive that we have more women, you know, in positions of power, you know, socioeconomic areas. That's wonderful. But again, I'm saying if you look on the ground, if you go and talk to those women, the points which I'm raising is you walk into a meeting perhaps with a male who's come along to take minutes. But when you walk in, they will completely ignore, you know, the boss, the director who's come in and speak to you, the person who's come to take minutes. And why is that? It's infused. It's a systematic thing. It's a thing that stems from, in some cases, at home. It's our societal values. Again, we can talk about it. It sounds nice. We want to appear progressive to the world. But, you know, in reality, we still suffer from, you know, those cultural norms and beliefs about the role of women.
Now, Jackie, speaking to Honorable Member of Parliament, Themba Mliswa, you know, he say, and I've followed then, I've then followed parliamentary debates, that in Parliament, men are the ones who are doing more of the fighting for women equality, for women gender issues, other than women who are in Parliament themselves. Now, but this is the chamber for lawmaking. So where do we get the nucleus for women to begin to ensure that we fight for lawmaking, we fight for constitutionalism, and hit it home so that even as the executive sits, they are aware of it and they know that they have to follow the constitution?
I'm going to say something which may be considered unpopular by most women. This is exactly why, for me, these issues like women's quota, they sort of come across as just being, you know, ticking the boxes. You know what I'm saying? It's just, you know, it's to appear as if something is being done. And when you get the women's quota, I think Yasin referred to this before, that these are not women who are elected by the electorate. They are there at the mercy of their party. And some of them will just go into Parliament from day one to the last day without saying a single thing. They have not been put there on merit. So in as much as we want to advocate for equality in the level playing field, I much rather prefer a situation where people go in there on merit. Because once you are in there on merit, your conduct and the way you conduct yourself and the way you contribute to discussions, it will be meaningful. So, for instance, I think there was that MP Barbara Rosie. She displayed, she conducted herself, and everyone was like, "Oh wow, she's a Zimbabwean parliamentarian," because she was standing up there and standing up for what she believed in. But there are very few of those women, and more so from the women's quota. So for me, it serves no purpose. It's just a garnish, just something which is there for superficial reasons, so that it appears as if we've got a large number of women in Parliament, yet they are just there to display. They're not going to say anything. So my advice, or what I'd encourage my fellow women to do, is to take up those roles and not to be afraid of whatever negative consequences that may arise, or the stereotyping that may come as a result of you participating, and just focus on what you are there to do. Because at the end of the day, once you are elected on merit, you are standing on your own 2 feet. You are not dependent on anyone. You are not there at the mercy of anyone. And you know that you are accountable and you report to the electorate who put you in there. But as soon as we have the women's quota just ticking the boxes, they sit, and then we have women in Parliament. So we need to have women who are there because of merit. And this whole issue of yes, it's affirmative action, you're trying to right the previous wrongs, it's okay to a certain extent, in as long as it doesn't affect. Because in the end, we may end up having women who are there and not being representative of the general women population. So then there will be that issue again. But we have put so and so, but they are not performing. Simply because they were put there because they are a woman. They're not put there on merit. So I'd advocate for a situation where people are there strictly on merit. and then being a woman comes in as an addition.
At one point, the Pomona addressing a rally, actually a media workshop in Mtare, where we're discussing about the women's role in policy, lawmaking, and shaping. He appeared to say that women, there's nothing that has stopped women from starting a political party that has 100% women representation and contesting in all the constituencies so that they become the major lawmakers and they also become the executive. Does that appeal to you?
No, that would not appeal to me. I think it's just an issue of balancing. So it's not about having all women, because I think at one time the motto or the for this equality was that balance for better, isn't it? So you have to have that balance. You can't have just all women. That would not do any service to the community at all. We need a balanced kind of society, a balanced makeup. So to have an all-women party, I do not think I would advocate for that myself.
But do you think, that the Constitution, I don't want you to think rather, you're a lawyer, so I'd want you to maybe just, look at the laws that are there in the Constitution. Does it empower? Does it encourage equality and empowerment of women in Zimbabwe? Yes,
definitely. The Constitution gives 100% empowerment to women, but as we have been saying before, there are other factors outside of the Constitution which then affect the consumption or the implementation of that Constitution to the fullest. You have provisions. I think for me, I have one I am problematic with. The one where women are exempt from the death sentence. I'd much rather we have equality all the way. You don't want a situation whereby one is affected unequally. So that means women were pushing for it, and that's how they got it in the women are exempt from the death sentence. That is good. But so that's the nature of our Constitution. It empowers women. It gives you all these equal rights. We have the Gender Commission, which has been set up to look into issues affecting women. But without the women themselves standing up to participate, this would just be a window dressing, nothing meaningful out of it. So more than just having a good constitution, there is also reaching out into the communities, telling them what the law says, and generally being a more accommodative society in terms of when we look at the women who are participating. And also, I will say this again, which it may end up sounding unpopular, but I believe in as much as there is also stereotyping, as women leaders, we need also to conduct ourselves. You're that much under scrutiny. You also need to conduct yourself in such a manner that will make sense, not just to society, but to encourage those young ladies who are coming up to emulate you and want to be like you. So at the end of the day, we have that dual role. Yes, it is wrong to stereotype. It is wrong to attack women who are participating in politics. It is wrong to call them names. But you also have a duty as a female leader who stood up, the rare ones who stand up, to conduct yourself in society in a manner which will then encourage other young ladies and other young girls out there to want to stand up and be counted and do what you're doing.
Now, I'll just throw the same question to you.
Repeat the question so I answer properly.
The Constitution, as a lawyer, as a legal person, maybe you can just even get us through some of the provisions, if they are supportive of women empowerment and equality in Zimbabwe.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with Jackie. I think probably the most important provision relates to the non-discrimination of women. And also Zimbabwe signed and ratified the Convention Against the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And that's mirrored, in our Bill of Rights. The right to health or health care services, that's also within our constitution, where women, particularly women who are pregnant, etc., should have access to healthcare. And just speaking about healthcare, I know, I think it was 2020, just when COVID started, we had a case at Harare Central Hospital where 7 children died unnecessarily due to understaffing and all these other things that were going on. But the right is there. It's in the Constitution. Women, the quota system, that provision, it falls within the Constitution. The abolition of child marriages, genital mutilation, forced virginal inspection, all of that, there's provision within the laws of this country that directly address that. But I feel that the legal framework is not the problem. The legal framework is there. Make no mistake, it's there. It's again coming back to our societal norms or beliefs or prejudices that make the pursuit of women extremely difficult. The law is fine. It's us, the people, with the issue. And I know you mentioned the aspect about, I think it was, you said Temba Mliswa, who said, well, women can start their own parties and do this. Pomona, thank you. They can, probably, yes. But do you think they'll be taken seriously? The way society currently perceives women. They can do that, it's fine, yes. They've got all these opportunities, they can do all of this. But if society still holds close their beliefs that a woman's place is in the kitchen, a woman should be docile, not submissive, docile, should be extremely docile, even if you're occupying a position of power.
Didn't you take Grace Mugabe seriously?
I took her seriously. For me, I think I was glad to see a woman. Again, I'm not going to speak on politics. That's not my portion. But for me, it was interesting to see a woman stand up and speak. And I think I'm balanced enough to be well aware of the issue. With Grace, a huge chunk of it as well involved the fact that she is a woman and she is speaking in this way. Who does she think she is? There's, all these other men who are better suited to this position.
But is it about men or women? Because there are other politicians who have stood up as men and they've not been taken seriously. And even from a political party level which had layers of respect. I'll give you the example of the MDC-T, now MDC Alliance, which was used to be a big political party. But in the recent by-elections, even if it was led then by a man, Douglas Monzola, it actually started getting zeros. So is it about men, women, or it's about the quality of what you give up?
No, I disagree, because I think oftentimes we focus on or throw allegations of perhaps the women are not effective. They're just being handed things on a platter and they're not doing anything. And to be fair, as we mentioned, there are some, parliamentarians who've sat in parliament for many, many years, have done absolutely nothing for various reasons.
What cars?
They've got their cars, they're comfortable, no one is going to attack me, no one is going to call me a lady of the night, no problems, I'm comfortable. And that's an issue because we should be fighting. But again, you can't ignore the issues we raised earlier, that there is a very significant personal risk to standing up and being a voice for women. We can't ignore that fact, and it's something that we really need to think about. And yes, there are men who stand up and speak for women and women's rights. But the question we should be asking is, why aren't they taken seriously? When they stand up and say women should be in positions of leadership, women should occupy this kind of space, why aren't they taken seriously? Because there has been no shift or no significant shift in our societal norms and values that are there. So perhaps I applaud all men who stand up for women's empowerment, women's rights, but still there's a major issue. And I think, to be fair, yes, there are women as well who will look at women occupying these spaces, and they too will say, you know, today, stay at home. Why are you doing this? You're being a problem. Take care of your children. You're spending the whole day. There are women who will do that. So in that aspect, women as well, there needs to be that shift. But I think the reason why I speak specifically about the men is that in practice, particularly in institutions, you know, be it governmental institutions, companies, whatever it is, yes, they might speak, we might talk about all of this, but on the ground, discrimination is being perpetuated on all levels. And I think that's where the issue is, and where we need to figure out or have a conversation about what can be done to change that, you know, societal perception that we have.
So there's the theory and there's the reality of,
Yes,
of issues. But Jackie, you know, I keep on trying to play the devil's advocate here, so that we get this conversation to the you know, to the layers of those who are sitting at home, who have this kind of thinking in their mind. That you talk about women being stereotyped, and women being called names as they step into the political arena, and this is what has made men stay away, you know. But men have equally been called names. Morgan Tsvangirai was called Chematama, open zip, shut mind, you know, Jose Chinotimba has been called all sorts of names, and he has taken those and made jokes out of them, and you know, and men in politics, there's a stereotype. When you see a man in politics, you think Mbava, you know, they're out to steal something. They are looting. You know, they are looting. President Emerson Mnangagwa has had it, even so many, but they are still there. So why should it be different for women? In fact, there's an old adage that says politics is what?
The dirty game.
Exactly.
Blessed, I would like to agree with you there, and this is why I've said constantly that I may say things which may be deemed unpopular, but definitely women need to get out of their comfort zones. And I think there's that element of wanting to stay in your comfort zone within what is comfortable for you. But when you go out into politics, definitely it's going to be outside of your comfort zone. The same goes for women who are in parliament already. Even if it's on the women's quota, you have to ask yourself, what am I here for? What change am I going to bring? What will I be remembered for? You know, the whole report will have nothing that you ever said in parliament. We've had good parliamentarians, women parliamentarians. We've got Priscilla Metsihairabi, we have
Jessie
Majome, exactly. Thank you for that. You know, women who stood out and can say that when I was there, I advocated for this and stood for this. And Priscilla Metsihairabi wants to be, sometimes she pushes that controversial, never minding the stereotyping. She
controversy sells, eh?
Yes, she embraces it, yes, and pushes her point forward whilst embracing that controversy and that name.
And we will never forget it.
Yes, and she will still achieve her purpose. So women should not be afraid of stereotyping. Like you rightly say, even Douglas Munzorashi, he's at the receiving end, being called so many names. So that you will be called names should not be something which throws you back. Secondly, when I talk of the comfort zone, there is that element, or I think it's just because of our patriarchal society, the way it is conditioned to be, you know, men go out and hunt and the women stay at home with the children. With this constitution, what it says is that you are equally allowed to go out there and participate, whether be it in leadership positions in the economy, companies, businesses, politics, councils, NGOs. You are allowed. And for women, what it means is that you have to make sacrifices. Everything requires a sacrifice. If it means that you have to sacrifice time spent with your children to go out there save your society through contributing in parliament, through contributing in the council affairs, through contributing in leadership positions in companies, then it's a sacrifice you have to make. Nothing will come easy. For those women who came before us to advocate for these changes that you see in the legislation, for instance, women are now allowed to go and apply for their passports, for their children's passports. They never used to be. That was the case of Margaret Dongo. She stood down and her son had to go for years without the passport because they were fighting this case for all of us in court. So it takes sacrifice. Everything will take sacrifice. Nothing will come to you. The Constitution can say this, but if you don't stand up to be counted, to participate, it will not mean anything for you or for society. So we need to stand up and sacrifice sometimes time with children, sacrifice our motherly roles or wifely duties to participate in the society, and also know and appreciate that this is an equally important role. You are not wasting time by doing that.
If you do that sacrifices, you say, you actually make better laws that will ensure that your children get a better future.
Indeed.
Amazing. But Yasin, what are the limitations of our constitution, if any, in terms of achieving equality? Look, I'm a journalist. I'm the informed one. You are the learned one.
I think for me, in terms of limitations, I think I still stand behind the fact that there's an exuberance of provisions in the Constitution for women. And sometimes in our exuberance, we don't necessarily take cognizance of the cons in situations like the quota system. You know, it's a very progressive thing to say we now have women with reserved seats just for them. But also the limitation in doing that is encouraging real women's empowerment and women being directly elected to government. It's diminishing that. You know, so again, I find that the Constitution, it's very progressive if everyone is following it with the correct mindset or mind change, because otherwise then the Constitution just serves as a token. So I think it's its own restriction, it's its own constriction, because it makes such extensive provisions for us women, where sometimes it might be confused with, again, tokenism.
Yes.
We just give it to the women because
they're women.
Yeah, they're women. They deserve women's rights, at the cost of the fact that women can, or women who are able
real participation.
Exactly, to participate and participate meaningfully to, you know, whatever the situation is. So it's
so you get tokenism.
Tokenism. That's always the biggest
the
issue.
boxes.
Exactly.
So for me, I would not advocate for the keeping of that quota system. I think it serves no meaningful purpose, especially when you then report that those women are not participating in debate, in parliamentary debate. So then you then ask yourself, what are they there for? Are they really representing the women constituents that they're supposed to be representing? In what way are they doing so? Apart just from being noticed that, yes, they are parliamentarians, they are honorables and so forth, and they get all the benefits associated with that. Because also you need to be aware that if you are there on a quota system, you have to represent the women constituency. It's like when you have the quota for the disabled, those people are the most effective. They will push and push, and they will be loud, and they will speak out for the rights of the disabled. But if you get the women's constituency, it's got a whole quota there, and they don't say anything for women from the beginning up to the end, then that provision, it means it's a total waste of time. It's tokenism, and it's not giving us any meaningful results.
And I think, yeah, just to add on quickly, another thing which my sister touched on is the element of having a thick skin. I think it's terribly unfair for women to have a thick skin in order to push or fight for their rights. I don't think that's fair at all. But again, on the ground, we're currently at a stage where women, they don't have a choice. They haven't been given a choice. You just have to have a thick skin. So you'll find,
Is yours thick?
It is. I believe it is. But not by choice. Inherently as an individual, I'm a calm, peace-loving person. But when you step into certain roles or into certain spaces, I find that I have to toughen up, just mentally, just make sure that I'm ready for whatever is coming. And also in explaining myself, I can't sit and say, oh, I think, we need to fight for women's rights, because then I'm not taken seriously. I literally have to sit there and say, it needs to be done this way, no nonsense approach.
But you were part of COPAC, am I right?
No, I was not.
But did you make any contribution in terms of the law making?
I did not for COPAC. When COPAC came around, I believe I was still in university, because I pursued my education all the way to master's before I actually started working in practice and later on in civil society. So I wasn't involved in that process.
But do you think women played a sufficient role that resulted in this law?
Absolutely. I think I spoke about the G20. And as a result of that movement, just over 75% of the requests or the demands of women were ultimately incorporated into the constitution that we have now. So I think in that... Yes, that's powerful. That is powerful. But again, bear in mind, this is a process to support something to be put on paper. To be put on paper. But women occupy the position, and being respected and taken seriously requires that thick skin. Even with our judges, I think I'll use Justice Makarao as an example. Tough as nails woman, just super strong, very sure of what she's doing. And I always wonder if is that by choice, or is it because of the nature of the environment you're in? But normally you find women in these spaces are normally, very set in themselves and in what they want to do. That's how they succeed. But that's not fair, because not every woman is like that. And not every woman should be forced to be that way, to be taken seriously. It should be based on merit. It should be based on what I bring to the table, what I deliver, and not how I have to carry myself as a hardened person or whatever it is to be taken seriously.
When you say what do you bring on the table, I saw Jackie smiling, because there's been this thing going around on Twitter where guys just throwing what do women bring on the table.
We are the table, okay? We are the table.
But Jackie, on the same issue, maybe to start with, did you play any role in the constitutional making system as we went through COPAC?
No, I did not play any role in that. But I do agree with Yasin that meaningful achievements were made, or milestones were made, and remarkably, like I said before, the one exempting women from the death sentence. I think that required a push from the women's movement. And as a lawyer, I do get involved a lot in issues to do with the women's movement, advancing women's rights, in terms of like the case that I was making reference to, the Margaret Dongo one, where then it ended up with women being allowed to also apply for passports on behalf of their children, which is big, because normally they are the ones who are the custodians of the children, and yet they are not the guardians. So in terms of making decisions on behalf of their children that they stay with, they were disadvantaged. So, women have made great strides in terms of trying to evolve the law for their benefit, including the laws that brought about the Domestic Violence Act that took a lot of push and it simplifies the law for women to be better able to access courts in instances where they are being harassed or being threatened and so forth. So it goes to women's empowerment, which also sort of like allows them to participate more in meaningful positions in society, leadership positions in society. Because if, let's say, your husband is saying, no, you are not supposed to go to work, and is harassing you for it, then you can always approach the domestic violence court and seek protection. So I think a lot has been achieved in terms of our legislation and our legal framework to accommodate women's rights as much as possible. However, all that is meaningless if it's not going to be applied and taken advantage of by the women themselves. If you have a beautiful piece of paper and it's just lying there and you don't take it up and you don't take advantages of the opportunities that brings, then it means that that paper is as good as nothing. I'll also make reference to, I think, the new procurement procedures. They are encouraging women-owned companies to come up and bid and participate in these tender processes, yet still those women are not coming up. There are none who are coming up to take advantage of those opportunities. So I would also want to disagree with Yasin at the same point that, you know, if you are a leader, if you're going to be a leader, you have to possess certain qualities. It does not matter whether you're a male or a female. You have to possess certain qualities for people to take you seriously. So that tenacity, that being thick-skinned, being able to take criticism and not letting it affect you and not, you know, letting you yourself be moody because someone called you names, just focusing. Like I gave the example of Priscilla. She will go out and be controversial and accept the stereotype the label that you've given her. She will accept it and still move forward. Never mind what you're saying, but this is what we want as women. She pushes that agenda. Then we have, of course, Namatai Kwekweza. She's been out there, a young woman, tremendously young. Other women, other girls her age, what are they doing? Where are they? She set out to push for an agenda against the amendment of the Constitution in certain areas, isn't it? And she was a lone voice, and no one else was taking up that narrative. Even her peers were not taking up that narrative. But if you're a leader, you focus on what you want to achieve. It may not have produced the desired results, but it's also recorded that this is what she pushed for, and this is what she stood for, and it's there. So it's not about achieving the results, but participating in displaying those leadership qualities. And that applies to both men and women. So I'd want to say on that note that as women, we should also try to shy away from the victim mentality to say, we are the victims, we are what, because we do have women before us, the Margaret Dongos, we have the Joyce Mjurus, who have stood up. We have the Opam Chinguris, they have stood up. They have counted for something in that patriarchal society. So that should then encourage the girl child, that should then encourage the female youth to stand up and do something and be counted in the society, regardless of what people may say.
Indeed, we we walk on the shoulders of giants, and they have been giants before us. You know, as you speak, Jessima Jomez, the Priscilla Misiairambwis, the Tabeta Kumalos of this world who have dared the Mbuyane Handa. Just on a statue behind this studio, they have stood and defined narratives for generations and have created a path of the freedom that we do enjoy. But I will allow both of you, I'm not sure who's going to go first, just in your conclusions, just to speak to women and law. Women and law. What can we do to make sure that law works for us?
Just as a parting shot to my fellow women is, major strides have been made in terms of trying to level the playing field for women and to make women better able to access more opportunities than they could maybe 4 decades ago. Let's take advantage of those opportunities. Yes, it may not be perfect. And the societal perceptions, they will change as soon as they recognize that you have something positive to bring. They will appreciate your efforts regardless of whether you're a woman or a male. So let's take advantage of the laws that are there, the constitution as it stands. Where it requires improvement, there's advocacy, there's lobbying. We lobby for that, we lobby for the necessary changes, but we do not stop participating until the environment is perfect. No, we participate even in this with all the disadvantages we're listing, the stereotyping and everything else. We participate even if it's like that, and still push for society to change its views and still push for laws to be perfected and made better and better as we progress.
And I think I agree with everything Jackie has said. I think for women, I would like to encourage them to own who they are. As much as, yes, there are stereotypes, etc., we spoke about the qualities of a woman occupying whatever position it is. I think for women, learn to be comfortable in who you are, and be able to occupy space without being tarnished by, our societal system as it currently stands. Progress doesn't happen overnight. It's going to be a long process. So I agree that we should take up space in whatever way feels good to you, in whatever way you can be effective. If you are a person who, as a woman, is outspoken and can thrive in doing that, occupy that space. You could be a quiet, timid thing, but you're strong in research, for example. Stand firm in that. Do that. If you know that you will fight anybody, on a physical level to protect your country, join the army, be able to occupy that space and not be limited by the constraints of what society puts upon you at the present moment. It's going to be a long process, but I'm sure eventually we'll get there.
You had to bring research, right? Your area of
Yes, of course.
You had to bring research. And there's your area of strength. But thank you very much, Madre, Jacqueline Sande, my sister, and Yasin Nari, my good friend, for joining me here on the situation right now in proud partnership with We Lead. We Lead, an institution of young women who are determined to ensure that law works for the betterment of human beings in this country and betterment of young women in this country. And they also conduct a number of trainings and boot camps with young women so that they have an understanding of the law, to have a grasp of the constitution and how best it can be used to further the interest of the people in Zimbabwe and their future. Now, this was the situation right now with me, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, the son of Bethroth Moyo, a wonderful and powerful woman. We have to respect women. We have to respect women in our society for the role that they have played and that they continue to play to ensure that this nation becomes a better place. Respecting a woman does not mean demeaning a man. There is no competition. There is no comparison. So if you respect a woman does not mean that women become lesser of beings. Making men more than women does not make you stronger. It just makes the nation weaker. Now this is the situation right now. And thank you very much for joining me.
chokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kuti isu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe chokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kuti isu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina